voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barber shop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah, it's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
Well, it's not Friday. It's actually a Tuesday, John. Did I throw you for a curve there? I'm playing the...
You sure did. You gave me that Friday feeling, as the youth say.
Yeah, the reason I had to do that is because we've got day 2 of technical issues. And I don't feel so bad because I know I've heard some of the other stations on the air talking about they're still recovering from the tornado and the storms and things like that. Had to play a long intro because I had to run to make sure the audio was properly going through our system, and I had to reset an alarm, and I couldn't have done that sitting here playing our usual intro. So I played the Harmony intro, which is Barbershop, which is so good. I'm sorry, it's so good. I'm not even patting myself on the back on that one. But anyway, this is the BJ Show. Today's date is Tuesday, March 18th. And what we do is we start the show off with John Combest. John is for so many years, 23 plus years, he's put together this great list of all the important stuff you should know going on in the state of Missouri. He puts it up on johncombest.com, 20, 30, sometimes 40 different items. Now, nothing fancy. You go to the site and you click on things and it gives you a link and it takes you to that website wherever these stories, that could be a newspaper, could be a radio station, could be an official government publication, could be something. But
yeah, it's none of that. It's none of the official government pages.
We bring this guy in right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do? He starts off with?
In third place,
3 stories today that are sure to warm your heart. And story number 1 will be probably one of your pet stories going forward for quite a while. I asked Brad that you not go to my website today because if you see the headline, you're just going to love it. But we'll start at number 3 today with one of your favorite topics, which is the cleanup of the Westlake landfill, Coldwater Creek, the Weldon Spring toxic radioactive area. As you likely saw yesterday, Brad, Josh Hawley hosted the head of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, in town. They were at Bridgeton City Hall, and then they took a tour of some key North County haunts, areas that you're familiar with and that a lot of our readers are familiar with, that have been contaminated by radiation from Westlake landfill and also Coldwater Creek. Now, you and I have tackled this topic many times. You're an expert on this, Brad. We probably don't need to retread through all the area that we have before. But the newest piece of it is that Josh Hawley actually brings the head of the EPA here. The head of the EPA says that he wants, from his team, in 3 weeks, a plan of how to move forward and how much it's going to cost. So really, it seems like we have 2 tracks going on here. We have what the EPA can start doing on its own and what it can start demanding on its own today, or ASAP, I should say. And then we have that legislative piece, that rock that Josh Hawley has been pushing uphill for years, that still hasn't gotten an affirmative vote in the U.S. House. 2 pieces I have up today. One is from our friend Jason Rosenbaum at St. Louis Public Radio. Another piece is from Joe Holloman at the Post-Dispatch. Both detail what's going on. And you'll see in those pieces familiar faces, folks like Karen Nickel and Dawn Chapman from Just Moms STL, along with a host of other characters that we've seen over the last few years telling their story.
Can Zeldin essentially, I know Hawley's trying to get this through the Congress, can Zeldin do something that will bypass what the Congress could do?
I don't know. And, Rosenbaum, it appears, asked the question of, look, with all these cuts to the EPA, are you going to be able to make this a priority? And Zeldin's short answer was yes. So it's unclear to me how much Zeldin could actually do without getting the RECA funds appropriated. My guess is there's not a whole lot he can do other than build plans.
You don't think that he can shut down a couple DEI programs and come up with enough money to maybe make a difference out there in Bridgeton?
I think we've already shut down all the stuff that discriminates against folks that look like Brad Hildebrand,
Okay. Well, you know what? I make fun of Josh Hawley, but I have to tell you that is impressive that he gets the head honcho to show up here. And, a lot of times it's like, we'll send my assistant to the assistant to the assistant to the assistant that'll show up. You know what I mean? You get the underlings.
Yeah.
And this.
Go ahead, Brad. Finish that thought.
He gets the head dude. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value in having a guy that heads the EPA actually meet with the folks who say that they have been victimized or say that their long list of medical maladies is attributable to whatever happened at Westlake or Coldwater Creek. Zeldin, as a unique anecdote here, used probably my least favorite phrase of the last few years. And he said that when you come to a place like Westlake landfill and you actually speak with folks who say that they've been victimized by this, quote, anyone who's been listening in this last hour, this hits different. That's a big millennial and Gen Z thing. It hits different. That morning coffee when it's brewed by someone with purple hair just hits different. I hate that phrase. It's right up there with it is what it is. Lately in the last 6 months, once again. Anyway, you know what I'm saying, Brad? It just hits different.
John's always complimenting me.
Matter of fact, once again, it just hits different.
I was just going to say, I like it is what it is. That's a good phrase.
Yeah, it's one of the worst phrases in the last probably 2 decades.
Well, John, you know what?
It says nothing. Of course it is what it is. Are you going to say, well, it is what it isn't? Well, that wouldn't make sense.
This show is what it was. How about that? Okay.
How about that, Brad? Now, as we get into story number 2, it's a topic that you inadvertently brought up yesterday because you're quite clever, Brad. And on one of the topics we discussed yesterday, you brought up a federal rule that you had no idea we'd be talking about today, but we are.
Up a notch to number 2.
Yesterday, Brad chose to use U.S. Congressman Bob Onder as a punchline, talking about Bob Onder's decision to be frugal and spend time in D.C. living on a boat. And Brad, as a punchline, you used WOTUS, the Waters of the U.S. rule. Now, even a man as brilliant as Brad Hildebrand could not have predicted that the good folks at the Brownfield Ag News would have a top headline today from Missouri's Ag Director, Chinn. She said that the WOTUS revamp is certainly needed quickly. Brad, I don't know how you knew this, but the EPA is having a meeting today in the state of Missouri. They're having a farmer roundtable where they're discussing waters of the United States. And the crazy thing about WOTUS, as I've read this morning, is that under the Biden administration, certain aspects of WOTUS were put in place for certain states. So it made it really murky. Certain parts of a 2013 rule were applicable to some states. Certain rules of a 2015 rule were applicable to other states. Chinn, Missouri's ag director, tells Brownfield, hey, we think that the Trump administration is going to be able to better define WOTUS so that Missouri farmers can define what is a navigable stream or body of water or pond and what is not. Let's finally get some certainty and clear this up. And we also had, I would point out, that the good folks at DTN, they publish Progressive Farmer, which is a top publication for farmers, a quote from a guy named Zippy Duvall, who has one of the best names in agriculture. He's president of American Farm Bureau, and he says a quote that sounds like something Brad would say. WOTUS has been a pain in the side to our farmers and ranchers because they define things like relatively permanent and navigable in ways that are too muddy. So, Brad, I've rambled on long enough about this. The short answer is Missouri farmers are going to get an answer soon. What's navigable? What's not? Is it going to be different in California than it is in Missouri? We're going to have some answers from Donald Trump coming up.
Okay, little definition here, and I'll give my straightforward definition of this. Waters of the U.S. was put into effect by the Obama administration. Essentially what it did was it essentially said that the EPA has jurisdiction over any navigable body of water. To them, a navigable body of water is, and this is not, I'm not kidding when I say this, if you had a low spot in your backyard and during a heavy rain, like let's say you got 6 inches of rain, they would declare that a navigable body of water. John, am I kidding?
No, you're absolutely right, Brad.
And it got to the point, and the reason why it hits home personally with me, at the crap transmitter site, there is a lake back there behind the antennas, okay? And I've had several dealings with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA and EPA and the whole bit. And the U.S. Corps of Engineers informed me that I can do nothing to that lake. I can't change anything because it's, guess what, a navigable body of water. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so, the crazy part of it is, what is it, navigable with a canoe? I mean, that's the whole crazy thing. And the reason the reason a kayak or something like that. The reason it impacts the farmers is this exact reason, because of the fact that especially cattle farmers will have a thing where they will take their bulldozer out and they will make an area where it can be like, where water will gather in there, and that'll be like a spot or watering hole, literally a watering hole where the cattle can get water out of it. And the farmer made it, but if the farmer decides he wants to move that watering hole, so he puts his bulldozer and knocks out one of the banks of the watering hole so it doesn't hold water anymore, he has violated a federal law. John, am I kidding?
You're absolutely right. And you're right about the depth piece there too, Brad. And the other thing that you didn't mention, and you had experience with this at the crap transmitter site, is that the Obama administration wrote a letter that said no matter the depth, Brad cannot be trusted to define what 6 inches is.
Well, listen to you. No, but the crazy part of this is it essentially made, I don't know, like puddles. I mean, like I gave the example. If you have a spot that fills up, I gave you a perfect example. If you come out of Washington and you're going north on 47, and matter of fact, I saw it just the other day after the big rains. One of the farmers' fields right there at the end of the runway, there in Washmo, if you know what I'm talking about, you can see it as you're coming on the bridge because you're way up high. It fills up with water. Under the current EPA rules, the farmer legally can't farm that area because it's a navigable body of water, even though when the water subsides and it's soaked up back into the ground, there's no water there anymore. He can't farm that area, and that's part of the reason why the Farm Bureau is and Brownfield has a story on this, because it's caused huge problems for the farmers, right, John? You would know this this came up with you when you were in Monsanto, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And groups like Missouri Farm Bureau have been sounding the alarm for so long here. And look, I guess if you look at it and you're an environmentalist, particularly during the Obama administration, you look at this as being another one of those pieces of legislation that comes with good intent. And, there's certainly people, I can't even say this without laughing, that say, if we're going to protect water, let's get the federal government involved and make sure that nobody messes with a body of water. And that'll protect everybody, right?
Well, and the problem with this is a perfect example of government overreach. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find, maybe with the exception of creating the Federal Reserve, there's very few aspects where you could think of worse government overreach.
It's just nuts, and it's driven the farmers batty for years because of the fact that essentially some of their ground cannot be used anymore because it's quote unquote a navigable body of water, and it doesn't have to be there all the time. That's the crazy part of it is, John, I knew that was coming up. That's why I talked about that yesterday.
I know. And one of the best things is one of the things that you should do is you should lobby Josh Hawley and say one of the reasons that's driven you batty is because you had to deal with WOTUS, Brad. I think that's a new angle. Maybe we could insert that into Rika as a little writer in there. You know what I mean? You were not batty before you had to deal with the WOTUS rule.
Okay, here we go.
The number one.
I did a little bit of rejiggering this morning because to some people, this wouldn't be the number one story. But I think to Brad Hildebrand, it might be the number one story. Missouri is getting a little bit closer to having its first official rock radio station. Did you happen to catch this news, Brad?
I did not. What is this?
There is a radio station that Brad is quite familiar with, that you were quite familiar with, that is iconic, not just in St. Louis or Missouri, but throughout the nation, and some say the world. And it will likely be designated as Missouri's official rock station. You have one guess, Brad.
KSHE?
KSHE 95. You're
Really?
exactly right.
Really?
There's a gentleman named Bill Lucas, and he's a state representative from Jeffco. And this bill would designate KSHE 95 as Missouri's official rock station. This was discussed 2 weeks ago. Missouri has a special committee on tourism. It's not to be confused with a regular committee or a standing committee on tourism, but a special committee on tourism. And Bill Lucas showed up, and he had a little can koozie that says KSHE. This article picks up the fact that, by the way, you're not allowed to have a water bottle koozie or a can koozie with a logo and a Missouri House thing. But he took a little rap on the knuckles for that, Brad. This story is brought to us by a gentleman named Charlie Dahlgren from the Columbia Missourian, I should note. Yeah, he talks about the fact Mr. Lucas was also a Marine veteran, and he talked about the fact that when he was in California, he was a machinist for the Marine Corps. And you know what? He'd have a hat with a KSHE logo. Somebody threw a Frisbee in his direction. He picked up the Frisbee. It had a KSHE logo. KSHE's all over the country. People love Sweetmeat, Brad. Pause, pardon the expression. So this is one of those kind of non-controversial bills that's usually passed, for lack of a better term, by acclamation if somebody has an idea for an official Missouri this or that. I mean, there's always a chance that some rabble-rouser would oppose this from a different city and say that KSHE should not be the official rock station. What do you think, Brad? Is it worth printing up a little paper to say, hey, we in the Missouri House, Senate, and Governor Kehoe declare KSHE Real Rock Radio the official rock radio station of this great state of Missouri?
I like it, and I think once again it's essentially recognizing radio. I mean, you know, the crazy thing about this is some stations. Remember when we had Mike Elamon, and in the podcast I did with him, he talks about all the different formats he worked at the one station. You know, one station was, well, one day it's jazz, the next day it's top 40, the next day it's this. And that's sort of a, you know, issue going on with that's always been an issue with radio stations. But, you know, I think it's a good deal. I'm not going to complain about it, John. I mean, again, it's recognizing radio. Now, I got a feeling there's probably people in Kansas City won't be happy with this because there's some good rock stations in Kansas City as well, too. But, you know, what the hell? You know,
yeah, but do their logos have a guy with marijuana hanging out of its lips, Brad? I don't think they can compete with that.
That's the old logo. See, one of my friends, I can't remember who it was, and I don't know how in the world we got talking about this, and I said, think about a radio station that has a mascot of a pig with a joint hanging out of its mouth, and this person went, I thought that was a cigarette. Oh, no.
Brad, do you know, I remember you telling that story, but do you know that until you pointed that out, I didn't even notice the cigarette in its lips?
Well, it's gone because they redid the logo. I mean, they
yeah, okay.
If you look at the current logo, it doesn't have it. But this was like the logo from back in the day. John Beck, once again, when he rode KSHE to the point it was, and it's nowhere near like that. He told me at one point they were doing $1 million a year in merchandise. $1 million a year in koozie cups and T-shirts and hats and stuff like that. That's not a bad little. We call it in the radio business. We call that what? There's a term for it, OTR or something like that. I can't remember. Nobody uses it anymore. But it was.
And now, wouldn't you think, in terms of a logo, you could put it back today because that type of stuff is legal? But also, isn't the age of the average KSHE listener need it for a little glaucoma or some aches and pains or some? Don't you think most KSHE listeners have gout?
But see, the funny part of that is, see, there's a whole nother generation that's growing up in rock and roll. For example, my youngest son, who's 30 now, or 31, I think, at least track of the years. I just go back. My youngest son's 31. Okay, how old does that make me feel?
He was born in '84, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so he probably already turned.
No. He was born in 93. 93. That would make him. Well,
that's
him
right. Yeah. My mistake.
Okay, December of '93. Okay, he listens to nothing but music that was done before he was born. I mean, that, when he listens to KLOU, and most of that stuff is 70s and 80s. I mean, they don't play any 90s music in KLOU. Just like KSHE doesn't play anything past 2000. And this is my son. And what's interesting about it is there's a whole group of young people who are growing up being Beatles fans, Rolling Stones fans, a lot of the British invasion groups and stuff like that. People who are, for the most part, dead. I mean, like, for example, I was a big Iron Butterfly fan. Last year, it was sad. The last member of Iron Butterfly died. 4 guys, Iron Butterfly. They're all dead, but yet their music.
Yeah, first of all, I've never heard of Iron Butterfly. It sounds like something you should be put in with a collapsed lung.
You have never heard of Iron Butterfly?
I've never heard of Iron Butterfly.
And
I'm guessing, are they related to Iron Maiden? Are they like a cousin of Iron Maiden?
The infamous In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. You don't know what In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is?
No. It sounds like something that would be taught at an uppity homeschool in Joplin, or some kind of Latin class at St. Pius.
Okay, here, I'll give you a quick tutorial on this. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, what the hell does that mean? They asked the members of the group, and the response was, hey, man, we were so stoned when we did the song. The real name of the song is In the Garden of Eden, but we couldn't quite get it out of our mouths, so it just got to be In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, baby. A true story.
Wow, I did not know that, Brad.
True story. You've never heard In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida?
No, and I bet if you played a few notes of it, I still wouldn't have heard it.
Oh, John.
I think you should call your son and say, can you believe this guy I do a radio show with hasn't heard In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida? And the guy would be like, I thought you quit radio years ago. I thought me and the other kids got together at our family meeting and said, you need to stop your radio addiction, Brad.
John, I'm going to say this. I've done a wrong thing with John. I'm going to say, John, don't ever listen to In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Don't ever listen to it.
Okay, I'll Google it over the commercial break then.
Well, here's the problem, John. We have no commercial break because the computer hasn't totally come back up. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pause, and we're going to say, hey, we'll be right back after this, and then this is going to be...